They say power changes people. But what if, in Trump's case, he changed the very concept of power? While the world struggled to understand politics, he transformed politics into a spectacle. Amidst applause and boos, the former U.S. president rewrote the rules of the global game, confusing allies, challenging traditions, and leaving even the most seasoned analysts without a script. What seemed like improvisation was, in fact, a carefully constructed script, in which the media, governments, and even we, the spectators, played roles without realizing it. Some see him as a visionary who exposed the system's flaws, and others see him as the embodiment of modern chaos. But one thing is certain: no one emerges unscathed after observing him in action. He didn't just provoke diplomatic wars, he provoked reflections. What is power, after all? Is it dominion over nations, or the ability to dominate narratives? And to what extent does truth still matter when image is what moves the world? Brace yourself, because this story isn't just about politics, it's about influence, manipulation, and the price of attention in a planet connected by screens and egos. We'll walk in Trump's wake, a trail marked by scandals, treaties, and decisions that still shape the future. And perhaps, along the way, you'll discover that understanding Trump is understanding the very times we live in. And of course, if you want to continue diving into stories and analyses like this, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. This story is just beginning. Building a media empire. Before Trump dominated the political landscape, he had already mastered something even more powerful: storytelling. He understood long before his adversaries that the true throne was not in Washington, but on the screen. Since his days on The Apprentice, every appearance, every catchphrase, every calculated glance served to shape a persona that transcended the man. He became a global figure. While others sought office, he constructed a spectacle where the audience, unwittingly, was part of the script. Trump didn't just use the media, he redefined it. He turned scandals into fuel, criticism into spotlight, and controversies into opportunities. He's like that student who knows how to turn a teacher's scolding into applause and leaves the classroom with more attention than when he arrived. Many leaders try to control the press. He learned to dance with it. And it's precisely this ability to transform exposure into influence that has put him back at the center of the world. But the real secret is in the way he made people feel. Trump understood something modern marketers still study: the power of being predictably unpredictable. He provoked, backed down, smiled, and attacked, all at the right time, all with a camera rolling. Every post, every speech, was an episode of a series where the entire world was the audience. And the most curious thing? Many hated him, but no one could stop watching. This is where the game begins to change. Because when spectacle becomes power, the stage becomes the planet itself. Returning to the board. Alliances and provocations. When Trump returned to the global stage, the world was no longer the same, and neither was he. He returned as someone who knows every piece on the board, every weakness of his adversaries, every loophole in the system. The curious thing is that, while other leaders try to build discreet alliances, he prefers to make his moves obvious, like a gambler, betting big just to see who trembles first. Diplomacy for him is a game of chess, but with cameras, microphones, and an audience. He reshaped international relations with the same style he uses to manage his business: direct, aggressive, and unafraid to break the mold. The result? Former allies like NATO and the European Union felt the weight of his words. At the same time, historic rivals, China, Russia, and even North Korea, were confronted in ways as bold as they were theatrical. It was a global repositioning that confounded diplomats and delighted strategists. After all, who else would negotiate with declared enemies as if they were old friends? But the most fascinating point is that, Behind the provocations, there was method. Trump knew that instability breeds movement, and movement breeds power. Every threat of sanctions, every unexpected handshake, every controversial speech, everything was calculated to test limits and gauge reactions. He understood that, in the modern world, whoever sets the pace of tension dictates the course of history. And it is in this accelerated pace, between agreements and breakups, that something even more intriguing begins to emerge. The behind-the-scenes scandals and manipulations that no one saw coming. Behind the scenes of scandals and manipulations, every empire has its backroom dealings, and with Trump, the spectacle is just the tip of the iceberg. Behind the scenes, there's a world of strategies, veiled deals, and moves that rarely reach the public. While the press raced for headlines, he always seemed one step ahead, almost as if fueling the chaos to distract attention from what really mattered. He's the kind of magician who makes you look at the wrong hand while the trick is happening on the other side. The scandals surrounding his name, whether political, financial, or personal, never completely brought him down. On the contrary, they seemed to strengthen him. It's as if each accusation fueled his narrative of persecution and resistance. While many leaders beg for credibility, Trump built power on distrust. He transformed "against me" into "they're afraid of me." This reversal is rare and reveals someone who deeply understands human behavior. But what's most intriguing is that his alleged manipulations aren't limited to politics. They invade public opinion, the economy, and even collective emotions. He knows how to use symbols, phrases, and gestures as weapons. A well-timed wink is worth more than an entire speech. It's a practical lesson in persuasion and social psychology, worthy of manuals few read but everyone lives. And while the world tries to decipher where scandal ends and strategy begins, he's already preparing his next act, transforming diplomacy itself into a spectacle. Diplomacy as a spectacle. Trump has transformed the act of negotiating into a performance. For him, a diplomatic meeting is not just a conversation between leaders, but a stage where every gesture is a message and every silence is a rehearsal. He doesn't attend international summits, he makes them entries. Each event is scripted with the vision of someone who understands that the image is worth more than the final statement. And the curious thing is that in this global theater, even their adversaries end up acting without realizing it. While traditional leaders seek consensus, Trump seeks impact. He prefers headline-grabbing moments to agreements that generate stability. And in the age of social media, this strategy is devastatingly effective. A short phrase, delivered in the right tone, is enough to move stock markets, ignite diplomatic crises, or redefine the priorities of entire governments. It's diplomacy turned into reality show, where whoever dominates the attention dominates the result. But there's a paradox in all this. The more he turns politics into a spectacle, the more the public confuses power with performance. The world has begun to measure strength not by coherence, but by volume, and, in this, Trump is a maestro. He conducts an orchestra of applause and criticism, knowing that both keep the lights on. But behind the scenes, there's an even deeper game going on, one that mixes influence, business, and power in proportions few dare admit. The hidden game: business, influence, and power behind every patriotic speech. There's a spreadsheet. Trump has never completely separated the businessman from the politician, and perhaps that has been his greatest asset. He sees international agreements as contracts, countries as partners, and leaders as potential investors. There's no emotion, only strategy. When the world saw rivalry, he saw opportunity. And this ability to think in numbers while the planet thinks in ideology is what keeps him consistently ahead. Some call it pragmatism, others cynicism. But in the end, it's just long-term vision. For him, power lies not in office, but in reach. Companies, energy deals, construction companies, brands, and digital influences all are part of the same ecosystem where every political decision has a direct or indirect financial return. It's like a gambler who bets on the right horse because he owns the stable, and that's why his footsteps echo far beyond the borders of the United States. This intertwining of profit and leadership creates a nearly invisible web, difficult to unravel. Governments change, but contracts remain. And Trump understands this better than anyone. He has built a network of power that doesn't depend on the White House, and perhaps that's what bothers his opponents most. Because, while they contest elections, he contests narratives, influence, and interests. And when the game extends to this level, the wars and treaties that follow cease to be merely political. They become personal. Between wars and treaties, the global stage in turmoil. When Trump makes a move, the whole world holds its breath. His decisions, often seen as impulsive, conceal a pattern of calculation that's difficult to decipher. He understands that, in geopolitics, chaos can be a tool of power. While negotiating peace treaties, he increases the military budget. While promising stability, he fuels tensions. He's like a player who provokes his opponent just to test how much he can handle before reacting. The Middle East is perhaps the most emblematic stage of this duality. Under his leadership, unlikely alliances were born, such as the Abraham Accords, a movement that seemed impossible and yet happened. But behind the smiles and official photos, a machine of economic and diplomatic pressure was spinning at high speed. Every public gesture hid dozens of private conversations where energetic and strategic interests spoke louder than ideals of peace. And the curious thing is that, even out of office, his shadow continues to cast over the global landscape. Leaders still ask themselves, what would he do in my place? This symbolic influence is one of the most enduring weapons anyone can acquire. Trump didn't just change policies, he changed perceptions. And it is precisely this ability to shape collective thought that fuels the next phenomenon, the birth of myth and the force of polarization. The myth and polarization. Few leaders have managed to divide the world like Trump. He's not just a political figure, he's become a symbol. For some, he represents resistance against the system. For others, chaos itself incarnate. He's the kind of character who transcends reality and enters the realm of myth, that space where people no longer discuss ideas, but beliefs. And the curious thing is that it was precisely this polarization that kept his name alive, even when formal power eluded him. Trump has grasped an uncomfortable truth. Love and hate yield the same result: attention. While many try to please everyone, he fuels extremes. One tweet from him can ignite crowds and at the same time attract fanatical followers. It reflects a society that no longer seeks consensus, but emotion. People want to feel something: anger, hope, indignation. And he provides just that, like a maestro directing contemporary chaos. But myth has a life of its own. It grows beyond its creator, fueled by speeches, theories, videos, and movements that take on unpredictable proportions. Trump has become a lens through which millions interpret the world. And when a man becomes a symbol, his actions cease to be merely political. They become prophecies. It is at this point, between devotion and rejection, that the question arises that few dare to ask: what will remain after the figure becomes a legacy? The legacy that shapes the future. Trump's legacy extends far beyond political boundaries. He planted a new way of thinking about power. His presence changed not only American politics, but also the language of global leadership. Today, even his critics repeat his methods: direct communication, emotional storytelling, and continuous spectacle. He redefined the concept of authority for an era where charisma outweighs coherence, and where a tweet can be worth more than a treaty. Like it or not, he shaped the new standard of modern power. But every legacy comes with a price. Trump's style ushered in an era in which public trust became volatile, and the truth became contested. His influence echoes in populist governments, in campaigns that use emotion as a strategy, and even in the way the media produces headlines. It's the domino effect of a man who understood that the stage is global, and that the public, even weary, cannot look away. Every leader who emerges today, anywhere in the world, carries a bit of his shadow. And perhaps this is the most symbolic point of all. Trump transformed power into a brand, and brands don't die easily. His name will continue to circulate in debates, theories, and history books as that of someone who broke paradigms and exposed the weaknesses of the system that created him. The world remains divided, but awake, because, after a leader who became a legend, no one looks at politics with the same innocence as before. Ultimately, understanding Trump is like deciphering a mirror that reflects much more about us than about him. The modern world has learned to thrive on controversy, and Trump simply knew how to serve the right dish. The question remains, to what extent are we aware of the narratives we consume? How often do we share outrage without realizing we're merely expanding the reach of those who dominate the attention game? Power has shifted, and perhaps it's time to rethink how we wield it, even in the smallest everyday choices. Think about it. If one man could move nations with words and gestures, what can you move with your actions? Great transformations begin when we stop being an audience and start acting as protagonists. The world is a stage, yes, but the script now is in your hands. And perhaps Trump's greatest legacy is this: proving that whoever controls the narrative controls reality. So tell me, what do you think about all this? Do you believe the world has learned something from this era of extremes, or has it simply changed its masks? Leave your opinion in the comments. I want to know how far your perspective on power and influence extends. And of course, if you want to continue diving into stories and analyses like this, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. The next chapter of this story is just beginning.